something happening here. But what it is ain't exactly clear.
All right, welcome back, everybody. This is the Founding Potters. I'm Mr. Leisman.
And I'm Mr. King.
So today's episode is going to be brought to you by the Founding Potters Podcast Network. That is right. We're going to be expanding, y'all. We have U.S. history so far. We're going to be doing government. We're going to do economics. Probably global, I'm thinking. Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, we're just going to keep expanding until you guys tell us to stop.
That's right. Definitely not math, though.
No, I can't do that. No, I might be able to squeeze a little bit of science in, but and be
It's
like,
probably
yes,
best to
science
not.
exists.
Yes.
But yeah, all right.
But
So last episode we talked about Daddy Trump, and here's the thing, y'all. We got to go back,
like all
the way back. Whoa! Sorry, that was too far.
Way too far. All right, that sounds perfect.
Perfect. All right, good. All right. So, like we said, we have to start from the top. We're gonna go all the way back, back to the what some people call the good old days. America before the Europeans showed up.
That's right. Yeah. So, what we're going to be talking about today, not just mainly, but the whole episode, is what America was like before the Europeans show up.
Right.
And there were people here.
There was so many people here.
Yeah.
So I think they say technically there were millions.
Oh yeah.
Millions of people that were here way before the Europeans even knew this place existed.
Yeah. And unlike what most history books would tell you, the Native American nations that existed on the North, South, Southern American continents were actually extremely advanced. So we're going to kind of dive into that.
Yeah.
We're not going to. Well,
Yep.
what I was going to say is we're not going to go, I guess, terribly deep into the Maya, the Aztec, and the Inca, because that's
a global.
I guess that's more of a global thing. Yeah. Like early civs. But estimates say somewhere between 140, 160 different tribes or nations. But those are just the actual nations.
Yeah.
There are millions of people within those.
Yeah. 'Cause that's a lot. 140, 160. That's more than Europe. That's more than 140, 160. That's actually about how many countries exist right now. I think the current total is 152.
Yeah.
Depending on what side you're on, but yeah. So I mean, that's a lot, and that's just on one. That's one or two continents worth.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of history books don't do these Native American peoples enough justice.
No,
but that unfortunately is going to be the ongoing theme of American
U.S. history. Yeah, this is not the last time we're going to talk about Native Americans, and it's definitely not going to be our last time talking about how we screwed them over.
Yeah, we'll talk about what was going on pre-European contact, but towards the end of the episode we'll talk a little bit I guess we'll dive a little forward.
We're going to start talking.
But there's a lot more. Yeah, there's a lot more that we'll talk about as we go through the rest of these episodes. But let's just get this out of the way. Stop saying Indians.
That's a big one.
They're not
at all.
No,
it's 100% a misnomer. It's not anywhere close to what they want to be called.
And the reason for this is because some watery tart named Christopher Columbus thought he landed in India.
Right. So there was a comedian that's always I've seen that is always oh, you guys are Indians? No, you're Indians. That's essentially exactly what he did.
Right. Indians live in India. We are not in India. We're actually in the Americas. I don't know why this is still confusing.
Well, because I chalk it up to lack of education or even lack of empathy.
Yeah, I guess. Well, a lot of pop culture, or I guess maybe not nowadays, but what has been embedded into our society has always called them Indians. Growing up, you'd play cowboy and Indians, and you chase each other around.
Cleveland Indians,
Yeah, well, right. There's baseball teams, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, but I mean, eventually I like to think we'll get there. We'll fix it.
Well, we'll see about that.
So here's the crazy part, though. Besides the fact that we're not going to call them Indians because they're not Indians. and we talked about that there are millions of people here. There are 140, 160 nations. People actually have been on the American continents for about 12,000 years.
That's a lot of time.
That is a lot of time. They basically, so the whole story is that people were migrating across the world. People came, a series of people came from Russia, where it is now Russia, across over into Alaska, down through Canada, wham bam, right into what we call the United States of America.
Yeah, and they would have, and this is another global thing too. Well, I guess it's geography too, but like that they crossed over the Bering Strait, the
Yes.
Bering Land Bridge.
Yeah.
No longer there. Well, the Bering Strait is there, but the Bering Land Bridge is not there because of the Ice Age.
No, that area is now reserved for territorial disputes between America and Canada and crab fishing.
That's right.
Crabbing.
Oh yeah,
You know,
Alaskan king crabs.
Those what's that show? Where they did
I know. It's probably like crab wars. History Channel crab.
Because I love this show and I can't remember. Deadliest Catch.
Deadliest Catch. That's right. Yeah,
that's
where that takes place.
I literally loved that show. That was such a good show.
But I guess to go back to what you were saying, people have been in the Americas since before the frickin' Roman Empire.
Get wrecked. Like that's like, I thought that was startling. That's why I put on all caps, is because I thought that was actually kind of startling, because I was like looking to see how far back the Roman Empire was, and I'm like, oh, it was definitely.
Well, I think the problem is that like things are never put into context when we teach history. I try to do a good job at it, but obviously I still screw up here and there. But like when we talk about certain parts of American history, obviously a lot has happened in Europe at this point, but it'll be like, yeah, this is kind of the time where Napoleon's running around doing Napoleon things.
Yeah.
You know, so.
But,
and they were like, well, I had no idea.
Right. Yeah. Because I mean, like, I always like try and like put things into scope. Like I'll see when certain people live, I'm like, all right, what was going on like in U.S. history, or what was going on in another type of history, like during that time, like what were they living through? And it's kind of cool to see like the overlap, but there is no overlap.
It was just kind of happening here, and at this point in time, they're still like kind of throwing mud at each other.
Oh, they're literally. Oh yeah, no, they're throwing their dookies out the window. There's no indoor plumbing. There's
more on that later, right?
There's like disease rampant all over the place. But back in America, like anywhere else in the world, Native Americans did not speak the same language.
No, they didn't just speak Native American. You know, and if you're thinking that, you gotta like kind of go read a book or something. I don't know,
or just finish listening.
Yeah, that works too. Oh yeah.
But also, shout out to the 9 people that consistently listen to this, like on a regular basis. Yeah. We love you.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, we can make this like into a pyramid scheme. If you show 2 other people, you know, like that, and then those 2 people show,
and then you give the person above you $5.
No, it's not a get rich quick scam. It's not like that.
It's a multi-level marketing.
Exactly. And you're like, you know what else is multi-leveled? A triangle. Anyway, several U.S. states have their names rooted in Native American languages or history or both, really. So just to name a few, you have Alaska, Alabama, Arizona, Connecticut, Illinois, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Mississippi, the Dakotas, Oregon or Oregon, however you want to say it, Tennessee, Wyoming. Not even a real place.
No, it's made up. But yeah, much of New York and Long Island are rooted in Native American culture. It's actually it's like both Native American and Dutch. So like we're gonna get to that later. But like what's not named after Native Americans are named after the Dutch.
Right. Yeah.
Long
the
Island.
only reason why things are English oriented at this point is because eventually England comes over and it's just like, hey, you want some money? And the Dutch are like,
okay.
Yeah, we like the money, big summer blowout. Yeah, like it's just not, you know. So anyway,
yeah. So I mean, like towns like Wantagh, where we we kind of grew up, Massapequa, Suffolk County. I mean, you've got like Amagansett.
Oh yeah, most of Suffolk County,
Quogue, Aquabog, like literally every. That's why Amagansett, Narragansett, Montauk,
Cachog. Yeah, like there's a lot of these places, which side note, if you're not from Long Island, these names you're probably like, what? My favorite thing is the like The in-house hockey team for Long Island is the New York Islanders. They frequently do this thing where they like ask the new players to try and pronounce the towns on Long Island, and they're just like,
Yeah.
I can't do
Yeah.
it.
No.
It's tough for sure.
Oh, it is. And it's so funny because like I like to like screw with people, and I'd be like,
Hmm.
I've actually done this to my wife because we both grew up on Long Island, and I was just like, hey, quick, pronounce this. And there
Yeah.
was a couple times she's like, that's not even a town. I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, but it is.
Yeah. But
um,
sick.
but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, we'll definitely like on our Instagram post we can put up a picture of like a map of Long
Sure.
Island with like the different names,
Sure.
because
Sure.
it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think it's a
Um,
good idea.
hell, I mean, like even like things like food, were cultivated by Native Americans from plants like that were wild and turned into things that we can eat.
Yeah,
Potatoes,
they genetically engineered a lot of foods.
yeah,
Actually, my wife is taking a course on Native American studies right now,
that's
and I've
actually
been
awesome.
watching some of the documentaries on it, and like corn
Prepping, yeah,
and potatoes,
yeah,
they were genetically engineered to be the way. Like I think eventually, like at one point, the corn like plant was actually
hmm
like no bigger than the size of your thumb. Obviously, that's not
I
feeding
guess like
anyone.
the baby corn that we think of it maybe.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
like something
so
like that. And then eventually they were like, "No, we got to pump this up." So then
the
they
rookie
like
numbers,
mixed and
yeah,
matched different, yeah.
yeah,
But
well, yeah, yeah,
most of Europe would have actually died without these fruits, and or not just fruits, but foods,
yeah.
because like I mean, think about how important the potato is to all of Ireland.
I was gonna say like
Yeah,
we kind of think of it as like a strictly like Irish thing, and it's like it's
no,
not. No.
no, like the potato is to Ireland as spaghetti is to Italy. You know,
Yeah,
it's so important in these areas. Didn't come from these areas.
exactly. Yeah.
And if you're Italian, like, hey, bapa da boopy, what do you mean spaghetti is Italian?
What do you mean it's not
Yeah,
Italian?
it's not. It's from China.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ask
or
your
what
big
is now
Marco
China.
Polo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But some other things, buffalo actually helped provide some natives with meat as well as clothing.
Yeah.
But Native
They're
American tribes they're actually notorious for using as much of the animal as possible, so they did not waste anything.
yeah, that's what they're all about is like no waste. If you're gonna kill something, because the whole overarching theme here is that everything belongs to the earth.
Mhm.
And that you're not going to take to waste. You're going to take,
That's
you're
right.
going to use, um
I mean,
because
they would use the fur, the skin, the meat, the bone marrow. I mean,
yeah,
they would use the blood. You know,
yeah,
like they used. I mean, well,
everything.
there's a voice crack there, but
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
they would. Yeah, that's gonna happen. But like,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, they used it to like paint things or like make
yeah.
soups or stews, and you know, like it's just they
It's
use
like
everything.
mind-boggling, like how much just what you can use
Yeah,
everything
and
for.
how wasteful we are as a civilization nowadays.
Oh yeah, we're
Yeah,
hella wasteful.
yeah,
So kind of like we said with the languages, and the different nations, Native Americans were not the same. This couldn't be farther from the truth. That's like a big
yeah. It's a
misconception
big,
that was one
yeah,
and done.
it's a big
Um,
falsehood.
yeah. Just, I mean, there were differences in languages. The way they looked and dressed. There was some tribes were more nomadic than others, meaning that they were constantly
Yeah,
moving.
and that's what I was going to say. Some tribes stayed in one spot, some tribes did not stay in one spot, and a lot of it
Right.
had to do with where they lived. Like if you live in a part of the world where the land is bountiful and you have like natural protections, you don't really need to move around.
Yeah,
If
you're
you
just
live
gonna.
in the middle of the open and you need to track animals, well, if the buffalo leave,
You're
do you
going
want to
with them.
die? No,
Yeah.
then you go. You know,
Yeah.
so a lot of their civilizations adapted to fit that lifestyle, right? So kind of
Right.
like you were saying, um, uh, some were completely like based around the concept of war, like that was their
Yeah.
whole, you know,
Yeah.
thing.
So
Like
I
for
mean, a
example,
lot of
the
them were.
Apache.
Then they were feared. Like
Yeah,
other tribes feared them. Meanwhile, like the Hopi nation was a lot more pacifistic. Like they were
right.
like, yeah, we're not about that life.
Yeah, which I guess is the reason why we have the Apache helicopter because that thing is terrifying. I would not
I
want that
guess
coming
it is.
after me.
That's the whole point. Yeah, they're an attack
Yeah,
helicopter. So some tribes are patrilineal, which means that the men were not just that the men were the rulers, but you went based on your man. It's basically the patriarchy. You went go based
yeah,
on like the male side of the family. Like when you get married, you take the male's name, last name, and you know everything goes based on like who your father is.
yeah.
Um,
But some were actually matrilineal, right?
yeah,
So that actually means that descent ran through the female side of the family. So there
yeah,
were some. tribes that went through the father's side, and then the other tribes went through the mother's side.
I'm trying to think of which one it is. I think it might be when we're talking about in a second when we talk about like Virginia and whatnot. There was actually one of the things I was reading is that there was a big problem when it came to like there was a big disagreement when it came to farming because a lot of times the men were the hunters and the women were the ones that farmed. So when the Europeans came over and they had the men were doing the farming, the natives were like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
hey,
Well, there was I mean,
that's not how you do this.
you'll see, but like, there was huge culture shocks on both sides for
Oh
when
yeah.
Europeans and natives meet.
Oh yeah.
But I guess this is I guess we could use as like a transition here. We're going to talk about a couple of specific tribes.
Yeah.
I think we're going to talk about like 3, I think.
Yeah.
We'll start with the Algonquin.
Yeah.
Probably because you might not realize it, but it's probably the most known one of them.
Yeah. So like
The 3
Algonquin
tribes
is
we're going to talk about today are probably the most well known in like just common Native American knowledge. There's way more than that. Also, if we mispronounce any names, we are very sorry. We don't mean to. We're trying our best.
yeah, we are not well versed in this.
I mean,
we're just doing our
I
best.
did try to Google like speak it, so like
Yeah.
just going off of what I either know from what I've heard at college or something, or in unfortunately mass media, which
Yeah.
I'm sure has
Is very
mispronounced a lot of
bad.
things.
Yeah.
Um,
So
but
one
let's
thing
talk about
about
the Algonquin.
Yeah, so the one thing about the Algonquin is that it's kind of like a language, it's kind of like a unifying, like kind of like a culture.
Mhm.
It's made up of multi-different tribes.
Yeah.
The first one of the ones that probably everybody's familiar with is who the British actually contacted, and that's the Powhatans.
Yeah.
And think about, and we're going to bring this person up later, but think of Pocahontas.
Yeah.
Because that's essentially the tribe that slaves nation that that they made contact with at Jamestown. That's who Pocahontas was part of, and you have other groups like I think it's it's the Narragansetts, and I'm assuming it's pronounced the Pequots.
I think so. I could be wrong.
And that's who the Pilgrims and Puritans made contact with in what we now consider like the Massachusetts Bay.
Yeah, and people like William Penn, which this should be no surprise here. He later goes on to start Pennsylvania.
What?
Yeah, he made contact with the Lenape natives, which
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure is how you pronounce it.
And
Again,
like
I'm
we
sorry
said,
if I'm wrong.
all of these agree. Yeah, no, I'm sorry if I screwed any of this up. But what do they have in common? They all speak like Algonquin, which is, I guess, like the language. They all like had very similar kind of like the best way I feel like I can describe this for like other people to understand is think about like Latin as being like the daddy of like European languages.
Hmm.
I guess Algonquin's kind of the same thing for this region for Native
Sure,
Americans.
sure.
You
Yeah,
got
like I'm
like
sure there were different dialects eventually
you got like
transformed into different
what is it like French,
French.
Italian,
They're
and
Romance languages.
Spanish. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're all based in Latin. All of these nations had languages based in something similar to
sure.
the
Yeah,
Algonquians. And so these tribes first made contact with the Europeans, and that they relied on hunting and fishing for food as well as working on smaller farms. When they wanted to move inland further, they needed things like canoes.
yeah. And actually, if you ever, I mean, you can Google pictures of what their canoes looked like. They are very impressive. They would cut down
Yeah.
portions of, I mean, they would cut down trees and use the entire tree for variety of different things, but a portion of the tree would be used to make a canoe,
Mhm.
and the process that they would have to go through to make a canoe, because it was all hand tools. They didn't have power
Yeah.
tools. They didn't
No.
electric, nothing like that. Very impressive, and how beautiful they looked too is even more impressive. So
Yeah, because they definitely put like different inlay, like different like designs on them,
yeah, sure, and
like
there were different.
customize them.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm sure like the chieftain's canoe was way better than like Farmer Joe's canoe.
Right. Yeah, no. And definitely like and I'm sure I wonder if like there's anybody that sold them and just slapped the hull and was like, this can fit much in it. like because I'm sure that they did that. It's like a universal. Slap the hull, this can fit so much in it.
Yeah,
This can
cargo
take you
space,
yeah.
car no go space.
Yeah. Car, car no go space, car on land. Like
Yeah.
it's like, yeah. But yeah,
But
no,
when it came to
these canoes
weaponry,
are
right?
dope if you like
Yeah.
Google them.
So
Um,
we'll talk about weaponry, right? So they would often use bow and arrows, and as well as
mhm.
spears. In fact, I mean, it's very possible that if you're just like doodling around in your backyard, that you could come across some like
Like
antique Native
arrowheads,
American
yeah.
arrowheads. I mean,
Especially if you're in like the
living,
Virginia, like so, like you're gonna have to go into these pretty much in probably these areas where like they made contact. So like is where you're gonna find the most of them. So like
yeah,
Jamestown, you're gonna in that whole Virginia, North Carolina region, as well as like new what we
people
consider
find
New
tons of
England now.
artifacts around like where I live now.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I think the reason for it is because a lot of the land right now is not developed, and as
Hmm.
it becomes more and more developed, people are coming across like some crazy stuff.
Yeah,
But
and especially where you live, like you're gonna come across like even cooler stuff.
yeah,
Like because you're not gonna come across just Native American, you're gonna find like a lot of American history stuff.
oh, there's tons of Civil War stuff like laying around,
Oh yeah,
just like
yeah.
straight up laying around. Like people will find like grape shot
Oh
in
yeah.
their yards. You know, like it's just
That's like insane.
yeah.
Like,
They'll just be like, "Dad, what's this?" And you're like, "Well, step away from that. I don't know.
put it down.
Might be a bomb. I don't know."
Yeah,
But as far as crops go, corn and squash were the most popular.
yeah. I mean,
But
it's like
let's
kind of
go.
we talk about. Like that's all
Yeah,
the ones like and pumpkins too. Like
but let's go back to Pocahontas for a second. Hey, guess what? She was actually a real person. Disney did not just come up with this person.
right, she was not just a Disney character, and I'm sure she sang other songs than like "Colors of the Wind."
Yeah, which fantastic song.
I'm gonna drop a clip
But
of that in here. She was the daughter of the Powhatan chief, who that eventually I guess like became like his name because that's you always see him as Chief Powhatan.
mhm,
So they had organized a confederacy of various tribes, like a communal like government,
mhm.
um, and they inhabited a lot of the eastern shore of what's now Virginia, which is kind of cool. Um,
Yeah, and she was
it's not
actually
cool. This is what's
yeah.
not cool.
Not cool fact was she was actually taken and held for ransom by the colonists in 1613 during a period
Ooh,
of
yeah,
hostilities.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's
That's not
you
good. No, like
know,
typical Europeans.
yeah, and also interestingly enough, while she was captured, she actually converted to Christianity.
My guess is
Uh,
by force because
yeah,
she
I'm
probably wasn't.
imagining
Yeah, when they
it was
say,
probably one of those like ethnocentric moves that the Europeans love
hmm
to do.
yeah,
Um, she was actually baptized under the name Rebecca. Pocahontas is way
one
cool.
Pocahontas is a lot cooler name. And so she actually, so the movie was like, oh yeah, she married and she fell in love with John Smith. Wrong. She was
Yeah,
married off, probably again, by force,
to a John
to John Rolfe and had a
Rolfe.
son named Thomas Rolfe.
Also probably by force,
Force. Yeah,
unfortunately.
no, I don't think from the moment we said ransom to where we are now, every single one of this was probably by force and against her will.
Yeah, and she was young.
Yeah, no, she so it says she made several trips to like Britain and like I think she had gone like back and forth
Hmm.
once or twice. Now, essentially what happened was, and I didn't read this in notes, but I just remember this off the top of my head. I don't know why. She was basically showed off like a show pony. They were kind of like they brought her back and like paraded her around England like look what we found. They have people there. Like look who we found and we converted
Yeah.
them to
Look at
Christianity.
this clock tower. Yeah,
Right, yeah.
yeah.
But they were kind of like there are people there and this is what they look like. This is what they like do and like look what wacky language they speak. Like
Hmm.
and we convince them to like accept Jesus Christ as their savior. So we could totes take them over. Give us more money to go and keep taking over their land.
Yeah. So basically, what Mr. Leeseman is saying is like she was like a show pony, right?
100%.
Um,
Yeah.
but you do have an interesting fact here. I
I
did not
do
know
hear.
this.
Yeah, so Pocahontas, so when they had their son, again, probably by force, Thomas Rolfe, he obviously fell in love, got married, et cetera, et
Procreates.
cetera. Yeah, several times.
Well, actually, I don't know if anyone in the 1700s actually fell in love, but whatever.
Yeah. Love was invented in the 1800s.
Yeah.
So, yeah. essentially what happens is they have kids. Thomas Ralph has kids who has kids who has kids who has kids.
Yeah, I think that's how it works.
I mean, I think so. They have two. She has two descendants that would later become first ladies. Edith Wilson, the wife of Woodrow Wilson,
Okay.
and then
Yeah.
Nancy Reagan, the wife of Ronald Reagan.
Now that's interesting. I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
I think they said they
but
could
I think
track down
she's-
like 100,000 people to be descendants of Pocahontas.
That's a lot of that's math right there.
Okay, side note, Nancy Reagan and Edith Wilson were both Woodrow Wilson and Ronald Reagan's second wives.
Even more interesting.
We're just going further down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, I also didn't know that.
Neither did I. Something told me. I knew Nancy Reagan was Ronald Reagan's second wife, and for some reason I was like, something tells me Woodrow Wilson got married twice. So I was like,
Reagan smash. Anyway, let's move on to the Iroquois tribe.
Yeah,
right?
but first, she died by the age of 20 or 21. So, like Mr. King, you said she was young. That's young.
Yeah, I think like when she first encounters the Europeans and she's taken like for ransom, I think she's like 13 or 14, and then she's married off to a guy and has a kid, and I think she's like 15 or 16. Yeah, and this guy's like in his 40s.
Yeah, none of this is okay.
And like people will be like, "Well, it was the times," and it's like, okay, pause.
That's still freaking gross.
Yeah, just no.
Yeah,
we got to send in
stop trying. Stop trying to make it okay.
Yeah. But if you're defending that, hey. Can I talk to you for a second? Yeah,
right.
like
I have a nice jail cell. You'll be very comfortable.
Yeah, the FBI wants to talk to you. Right. Yeah. So
right.
Yeah, the FBI is.
All right. So you said something about the Iroquois.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the Iroquois. So the Iroquois Confederacy. This is a big one.
Yeah.
It's made up of at least 5 different tribes that inhabited much of present-day New York and Ontario, Canada. Side note: if you're from New York, this is probably the tribe you learned.
Yeah, because I remember learning about them in like elementary school, and especially from being from New York and like going upstate on vacation a lot. These names have been thrown around a lot, and the whole Iroquois story has been it has been told before.
Yeah, but they created an elaborate political system that includes a bicameral or 2-state House legislature. That should maybe sound a little familiar.
Oh yeah.
And many compare this to the British Parliament and the U.S. Congress. In fact, some of our founding fathers draw inspiration from the Iroquois tribes.
Ben Franklin.
Yeah, Ben Franklin.
He actually invited them. He actually invited members of the Iroquois to come speak at the Continental Congress.
Yeah. Very forward for his time.
Oh yeah. So that's actually, I feel like that's like hella advanced, and people don't give them enough credit for it. Some of these tribes, so in the different houses they had, you had in one house of the Confederacy, you had the Seneca and the Mohawk tribes, and then in the other one you had the Cayugas and the Oneida. And then you had the Onondaga would be the ones that they had a veto power and they were able to break ties. So it was like super complex.
And even more interesting and like super advanced for the time also is they had an unwritten constitution.
Yeah, it was just kind of like told. Like
the reason why it's unwritten is a lot of these native tribes didn't actually have didn't have written language. They only spoke obviously orally. So that's why it's hard to find a lot of things with history because they didn't have a lot of things that were written down until much later, which we'll talk about a guy in the Cherokee tribe that we'll talk about, who actually creates a written language. But anyway,
they were able to draw stuff out. But like, I mean, especially now, you don't have too many people that can probably translate it exactly.
No, I'd imagine it's very difficult.
But there were some cool things about that unwritten constitution. So they had things like restricting people to holding like one office. You couldn't hold multiple spots, which is kind of like, we're talking like, this is going back hundreds of years. This is all before the U.S. Constitution. This is all before, we kind of like set the stage for what other countries want to copy as a constitution. This is where we stole a lot of our ideas from. They had the process to remove a leader, so essentially like an impeachment. They had that written. They had not written, but they had that squared away. This is how you remove somebody if they suck. They had the power to declare war, like what it took, and then they also had like we kind of said that balance of power between in the Confederacy and the different tribes.
So that's like
become
a just to yeah, just like I guess to relate it, that would be like the federal and state government powers.
yeah.
So like it's a lot of this should sound familiar if you've either taken government or the introduction to U.S. history, because this is basically the beginning of our government.
And like we said, guys, if you haven't, stay tuned because we are coming out with a government podcast. So
That's right. Yeah.
that will be coming within. My guess is I would say we could probably start that in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, probably. But back on track, right? So,
yeah.
Out of all the tribes, we actually know a lot about the Iroquois people.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I feel like this is like the most in depth we've gone. Talking about their forms of government. We do also know that they live in what are called longhouses. So they're basically like these big, gigantic houses that families would, or even multiple families would live in.
It would like small community. It would be like your community.
It's almost like an apartment building. Like a block. Yeah. And so some archaeologists have actually found that these longhouses could be like a football field or longer.
That's insane.
Like I said, like
I mean, I guess it's kind of like you said. It's like a horizontal apartment complex. Like
it's actually kind of really, really cool.
Yeah, and
especially if you've seen one.
Yeah, or if you've been to school in New York, it's in textbooks and stuff all the time.
Yeah. Also, guys, just like you're listening to the pod, you're listening. Go Google it. We'll wait.
But they were also they were a matrilineal society. Newly married couples would actually move into the longhouse of the mother.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of, I mean, that's their culture.
Yeah, that's right. Now, again, another misconception is a lot of people think that like when the Europeans come over, that Native Americans are just like completely uncivilized, backwards people. They're savages, and again, this is not true.
I feel like everything we've talked about so far kind of proves the exact opposite. They were super advanced for their time, and in certain circumstances, they were ahead of the Europeans.
Yeah.
It's just because they didn't do things exactly the same way. They didn't dress the same way. They didn't look the same way. They didn't build things or
well, it goes down to the whole thing that the winners write the history books, right? So obviously this should come to you as no surprise. Eventually, Anglo-Saxons, Europeans, they are able to successfully colonize the Americas, push out Native Americans off their lands, and they just kind of go into like by the way, there were people here anyway. This is what we did in our accomplishments.
Yeah, it was kind of, and even when they say like, by the way, there are people here, but they were totally savage. They were uncivilized. Yeah. They didn't know what they were doing. They were so backwards. They were so thankful when we showed up on their doorstep.
And that's not true. But anyway,
they were just like, these freaking white people.
Which is a common theme nowadays, right?
I mean,
I do want to talk about one more tribe. Yep, I do want to talk about one more tribe before we kind of like round up everything. But we have the Cherokee tribe, which might actually be the largest tribe in terms of like land ownership in North America. That is not the same for South America. Because
they're the largest in North America, and there were a lot of subdivisions in them. So it wasn't like
very similar to the Algonquin.
The
Cherokee was
like
just
overarching.
Like the Cherokee was like their national government, and then there were many tribes living inside of the Cherokee tribe.
Excellent example.
Even different, so basically what we were just saying, like even the different areas and peoples that were controlled by the Cherokee were diverse, very diverse. So think like, for example, New Yorkers and South Carolinians. It's the same country, but there's different dialects, cultural values, all those kinds of things. We have a common denominator that brings us together, that we live in the United States, but there are things that also make us very different.
Right. Down by you, Mr. King, I'm sure that they don't say no cap or yo, that slaps. There's definitely a lot more. You've definitely never probably said the word brick in the same context.
No, definitely not. I mean, there are some things, because specifically the area that I live in right now is it's like a lot of people have come here. Like it's there are a lot of New Yorkers in this area. There are a lot of I've actually met
A
a
lot
lot
of
of people from New Jersey.
carpetbaggers. Like,
Yeah, a lot of carpetbaggers. Yeah,
yeah.
but actually, the area of which people come from the most that live in this area are people from Ohio.
What?
Yeah,
And it's so funny because
because
there's
we
like, oh,
because we live in like a very like resorty, retirementy like
but like
area.
a lot of people, I feel like a lot of people are moving to Ohio. I guess they're pushing out the old ones.
Well, yeah, they probably moved to Ohio and they were like, well, this was a mistake, and then they, you know, anyway.
Yeah, what even is Ohio?
All right, so back to the Cherokee. They actually controlled most of the southeast, but they spanned as far into the Great Plains, which is essentially like the central part of what is today the United States.
Yeah.
Um, they traveled mainly by foot or canoe. Eventually, when the Europeans bring horses back to the Americas, because for a very long time horses were not in the Americas. So when they come back, so I don't know if you know that, but
Go
uh,
ahead.
horses were in the Americas at one point, and then like with the Ice Age and all that stuff, they like died off, and then like horses were only in what is Europe and Asia, and then eventually they're brought back to the Americas. A couple get loose, and then that's kind of what creates like the
That's
American
that.
Mustang. Yeah, the American Mustang, the Bronco, kind of.
Yeah.
You know, just like what Ford names their cars of. Anyway, but before they traveled by horses and stuff, they traveled by foot or canoe,
Yeah.
which
Um,
we're talking about large swaths of land. That is not something that I'd
yeah,
want to travel by foot. But
miles and miles. I mean, they had time where take
yeah.
their sweet time doing it.
So
But yeah,
anyway, I
so
think I had mentioned this guy before. His name is Sequoia. He's actually a famous Cherokee. He created a writing system and alphabet for the Cherokee language.
which is really really cool.
Yeah, it's very impressive.
Yeah.
I can't even speak my own language, so
Right. Like how do you just sit down and be like, I'm gonna write. Like I'm gonna
yeah.
just figure this out.
Yeah. Right. Now, again, because a lot of this land is being taken over by Europeans, this I don't remember if Sequoia is actually a Christian or not. But eventually, when this writing system is taken or like becomes a thing, this is when you actually start seeing like the Bible being translated and like
Mm.
hymns and proverbs and stuff like that, like being translated into their language so that they can convert natives at a faster rate. We'll actually, and I guess to round up the Cherokee tribe, but we'll talk more about this later. But this is actually the tribe that was impacted the most by the Indian Removal Act, and eventually
Oh
had to
yeah.
endure the Trail of Tears under
Which we'll get
Andrew
to
Jackson.
with Andrew Jackson and how jacked up that guy is.
Yeah,
Like how messed up he is.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I can find. Huh. Yeah, I'm just looking up like the language he created, like the writing, the alphabet he created.
hmm
Trying to see if there's anything about religion, but I don't see anything.
It was actually something that I learned recently because, like I said, my wife is taking that class,
Mm-hmm.
so it's something that I actually learned. So I mean,
That's
she's
actually
taking it,
really
but
cool.
I'm getting some free information, which is great.
Right.
Always
It's
good to
like
know.
it's like you're auditing the class.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah, yeah. Like I'm like some 78-year-old man, like sitting in the back of a mullet classroom.
I had a few of those.
Yeah, me too. But I guess like
Yeah, so
just for the like we kind of highlighted some of the major things you should know about these tribes. So this is
yeah.
that just like the 8 or 9 bullet points that we talked about them. That is not all of their history rounded up
No,
for you.
no. Obviously, do your own research. We're just trying to give you what you need to know.
Like open your eyes a little bit.
School, yeah.
Yeah.
We're bringing. This is like you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. We're bringing you to the water.
Right. But
Drink
I
away,
guess
my friends.
yeah, right. Drink water, of course, please, nothing
Yes.
else.
Yeah.
But let's round up, I guess, the episode, right? So,
Yeah.
upon first arrival, Europeans view the natives as inferior. Like racist ideology takes over, right? So,
Oh yeah.
this leads to an insane amount of racism and violence towards these people, especially if they're hesitant to share, quote unquote, share their resources or convert to Christianity. So,
Yeah, like we said, like the Europeans brought, like if they brought any of them back, they always characterized them as savage, uncivilized, backwards, and it's very much not the case.
mhm.
Um, the native people had running water. They had more advanced sanitation in their communities, while like we mentioned, Europeans were literally throwing dookie out the window,
Yeah, like literally.
like into the street.
Yeah,
Like,
like they were pooping in buckets and then just being like, yeah, heads up, and they would just throw it out
mhm.
the window.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's
like,
probably
and
where Heads Up came out. Like,
yeah, and like at the same time, Native Americans over in the Americas, obviously, they have like running aqueducts and advanced sanitations, like you said, and
mhm.
it's preventing certain diseases from spreading.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, you even eventually had, so once we get over that, Native Americans, their lifestyle has actually become more of like a fantasy, like romanticized version of like what we like think it's all about.
yeah,
Even though they were shown little to no respect by the Europeans.
yeah. Like I feel like it's easy for people to be like, I would have loved to be a Native American. Like I feel like that like I am. I could do that. And it's like I
I could
don't
live
think
like
you
that.
really
I could live
understand,
off the land.
right? Like I don't really think, hey, you can't even mow your own lawn.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like
no.
it can't be that easy. Like
Yeah, you have trouble like walking longer distances without getting winded. Like, sit down.
yeah, like but that's the classic example of like
Yeah.
these people have become like a trophy, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah, it's like kind of like what like we want to be like that. Meanwhile, like we eradicated that. Like the
Yeah.
Europeans like did everything they could to get rid of the Native Americans.
Yep.
I mean, today we've basically put the Native Americans, what we call reservations. We basically took all of their land except for these small little patches, and they
Which you'll find like there are some reservations scattered across the East Coast, but most of
Mhm.
these like large scale reservations are found in like the central parts of the United States or
Yeah,
on the West Coast.
the
Um,
Dakotas.
and a lot of people be like, well, at least we gave them that, and it's like,
Bruh,
it's
that's
nowhere close to the amount of land that they had.
right. And we're not giving them the best land either.
Yeah,
like
I mean,
here,
here's also a
dust.
side fact. What the hell is it called? I just had a brain fart. Um,
I don't even know where you're
what's
going
the
with
name
this.
of what's the name of the mountain that has all the presidents on it?
Mount Rushmore.
Mount Rushmore. Thank you. Yeah, that was I think it's the Lakota tribe. It was like a serious spiritual like spot, like that
That makes
area.
sense.
And the United States was like, yeah, this would make a great monument.
Yeah,
And
we're
then,
gonna put our people's faces on the rock.
oh, you use this for like spiritual ceremonies? We're gonna put some white people on it. Yeah, like and then
Here comes Washington and Jefferson.
yeah, watch out for Roosevelt. Right. It just
Yeah,
right.
yeah. No, but seriously, and so a lot of the people on these reservations suffer things from hyper poverty, alcoholism, drug abuse, mental health. Life sucks
Yeah,
compared to what it did for these Native Americans. Like
right.
they're and
They've
even
had
like
their culture
especially
stripped from them.
exactly, and you even have now you have like COVID is like
Oh
disproportionately
yeah,
affecting people of color, but it's like really hitting the natives hard.
yeah. Well, and
Hard.
because like, which is the next point that we were gonna make is some people say it must be great to live on these reservations because they
Yeah,
don't pay taxes, for example. But remember, this means they don't receive the same benefits as you and me.
yeah.
So like they don't get the same protections from the federal government that we do because technically that's not federal lands. So it's like their own
Technically, it's their
nation.
own nation. Yeah, no, that's exactly like what it is.
Like if you were to look at a political map, like a real political map of the United States, you could actually like, technically that land should be taken out. And it is a decent amount of
Yeah,
land, but it's not nearly as much land as they had when obviously they owned all of it. But
yeah. I'm actually trying to see if I
I
can
mean, there
find
are
the
some
name.
tribes that don't exist anymore because of
Hundreds of tribes that don't
yeah.
exist anymore. Yeah, no, like if you actually look, so I just found Native American reservations on the continental United States, large pieces of Arizona.
Mhm.
You've got parts in
Yeah,
New
like this. Yeah,
Mexico, Utah, Nevada, a couple in California, smaller ones in California. We've got big ones in areas like Montana, Wyoming,
Dakota.
the Dakotas, north and south, Minnesota, um, a couple in Florida.
I think there's some in Washington too, but
Yeah, Washington State
not.
absolutely has a
Yeah,
couple
I was
big
gonna say.
ones.
Yeah, I was gonna say Washington State, not Washington
Yeah.
D.C.
One or
Um,
two, like I think I count 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 3 or 4 in North Carolina. A couple of them are the border of South Carolina. It looks like.
Yeah,
couple in
because
Mississippi.
a lot of it has to do with the east coast of the United States is so heavily populated
Agreed.
and already like so um, like built up.
Mhm.
I'm not justifying. I'm just saying
No, we're
that's why.
explaining that that's why
Yeah.
there are less on the East Coast
Right.
is because we have essentially taken over.
Yeah.
We
Well,
really
not
have
essentially.
just
We have.
no. Well, that's what I mean. Like we've 100% just absolutely taken over. And so you've even had a lot of people speak out about it. There has been a lot of movements over it. You've had one of the most famous is the 1969 occupation of Alcatraz.
Which there's several documentaries on it, and it actually in 1969, this is when it starts. I think it goes all the way to 1971. You have a couple of I don't know exactly the amount of it. You have a decent amount of Native American people. I don't remember
Mhm.
what tribe they're from or what their like ancestry is.
So
But they take over the
just a
island of
quick Google.
Alcatraz.
Just a quick Google. It goes from November 20th, 1969 to June 11th, 1971. So it's
Yeah,
19 months
it's
long.
but it goes to show you like the strategic placement of Alcatraz.
Yeah.
But also the U.S. government couldn't have really just like gone in there and just like killed everyone because they would have looked like absolute terrible people.
Well, it would be even worse than. Oh, it just says in 1964, a small group of Sioux Indian
Okay.
Native Americans demonstrated the occupying for 4 hours. 1969, student leaders, Mohawk and Shoshone nations were part of it. I'm trying to see if there's any others. Cherokee, Eskimo, and Ho-Chunk.
Interesting. I didn't know that part, but in more recent news, you have many Native American people, and not just Native, but like even normal everyday Americans and Canadians are also assisting in this too.
Mhm.
They're fighting against oil companies drilling and running their pipelines through their little land that they have left,
Yeah.
especially their spiritual and ceremonial places. Because there are oil companies that are literally just putting these pipes through like burial grounds, ancestral burial grounds.
Right.
And like like in Christianity, if you dig up and like
It's a bad deal to
if you
disinter and pull up
yeah
someone's grave or
if you
even
pull up
mess with
someone's
it.
grave and you mess with it, or you like even take the person out of their coffin and like screw up like their body and stuff like that's a big no-no in Christianity, but like at the same time.
Forget even like talking it from a religious aspect. If you needed to disinter somebody, you needed to pull them out of their body out of the ground, even if it's for a like crime scene thing, like they needed to like take another look at the body
Mhm.
afterwards. Like it's a huge legal issue.
Yeah, but at the same time, you have these oil companies just being like, yeah, you can just drop this pipe here. And
Yeah.
not only are they doing that, but the oil from these pipes are frequently leaking into their water and food supplies,
Yeah, like
like killing their lands.
for some reason, even in 2020, we still haven't figured out to make a decent pipeline.
Yeah, I think it was in, I'm looking it up now, but I think um, it was mainly in, was it Minnesota?
I think so.
Or it
The
might be
Keystone.
Dakota, the Keystone pipe, yeah. And there was also the Dakota Access pipe.
Mm.
Like we
Yeah, this is through the Dakotas. It went through Canada, through the Dakotas, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas.
yeah, and I mean they're not. I mean, if you really think about it, like one, it's their land, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But two, like it's not like they're asking for a lot. They're just like, hey, can you stop messing with our water supply? We need that to
Yeah,
live, you know?
you think that that's like
Hey, my great
something
grandfather's
they
buried
can.
here. Can you not?
You're right. Like if it happened
Because
to the person
again,
drilling it, they'd be like, the people that are drilling and making this
the
pipeline,
federal
if they
government.
really wanted to go through their ancestors' like cemeteries, they'd be like, what?
Well, what I was about to say is like the federal and state governments, if they needed the land that you own,
Mm-hmm.
individual land that you own, to build something like let's say a parkway,
Mm-hmm.
interstate, something like that, right? They have to provide you with the money or property in a different area that is
Yeah.
similar in value.
Yeah, it's
But in
called
this
eminent
situation,
domain. Like
eminent domain.
it's part of
It's one of our constitutional amendments.
Yeah, it's literally in an amendment that like that's part of it.
I can't remember off the top of my head, which is I guess not a good thing, but it might be. Is it eighth, seventh or eighth? I think. But no. Okay, whatever.
It was the Fifth
Anyway,
Amendment.
Fifth Amendment. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it goes to show like the amount of disrespect towards these people is still very
Very
around.
much alive.
Yeah.
Very much alive. And it's
Yeah.
wrong.
It is wrong. But I guess that kind of
That's
wraps up
probably
the episode
good
for
spot
today.
yeah, because we don't want to really get into like the British and the Spanish and the French unloading their ships just yet. We'll say that for the next episode.
Yeah, because we still have to go over like the English colonizing the area. So.
Yeah.
But okay, so
right,
thanks
cool.
for listening. We'll talk to you later.
All right, bye guys. Like and
Bye.
subscribe.
You think you own whatever land you land on. The earth is just a dead thing you can claim. But I know every rock and tree and creature has a life, has a spirit, has a name. You think the only people who are people are the people who look and think like you. But if you walk the footsteps of a stranger, you'll learn things you never knew, you never knew. Have you ever heard the wolf cry to the blue corn moon, or asked the grinning bobcat why he grinned? Can you sing with all the voices of the mountain? Can you paint with all the colors of the wind? Can you paint with all the colors of the wind? Come run the hidden pine trails.
You too.